Okay, well, thank you. Wonderful conference, wonderful to be here. I'll ask Christopher and also Anne to come forward because we'll be holding the panel up here in the chairs. Christopher, you've met. Anne Boddington is Executive Vice President and Provost of IAFOR and Professor Emerita also of Design Innovation and has held leadership roles as Dean of Arts and Humanities at the University of Brighton, Pro Vice Chancellor for Research, Business, and Innovation at Kingston University, and Pro Vice Chancellor for Research and Knowledge Exchange at Middlesex University. These are very experienced academics and academic leaders, and so we look forward to the conversation, and I will come sit with them, and we will proceed. So I guess first, I want to ask you about the title of the discussion panel and its appropriateness. So the title is Times of Crisis. And either one of you can take it first, but are we in a time of global crisis? Or would you characterize it as something else? And what is the good, the bad, and the ugly of the times we are in right now in higher education? Oh, and first. I think it's on automatically.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Crisis? What crisis? Well, we're in a time that I think, particularly maybe for some of us in the US, some of us in Europe, feels very different. But I don't think it's been that different all over the world. I've spent 20 years of my life working between Israel and Palestine. So I've lived through that many times. It's never more brutal as it is than it is now. So I think one of the things that really struck me when we talked about this and saw the title was actually now it affects people that maybe it hasn't affected for a long time or for a while. So we're seeing, Christopher mentioned it earlier, that Harvard standing up to a government. I think one of the things, though, that's challenging in all of that is who can afford it. And I think that's something to be really cognizant of. And I think for Europeans, I know for the UK, it's been very hard to kind of understand what we can and can't do. And so it's challenging things that perhaps haven't been challenged in this context before. So we've been able to speak freely in many places. I've just come back from 3.5 weeks in Hong Kong. And people say to me, the politics must be terrible. Actually, I have the same conversations I've been having for the last 20 years in Hong Kong as I have done in many parts of the world. So I think it's what's changed and for whom. And many people are now asking, what's changing for me? And we've heard a lot about strategy this morning, but for most of you, I'm sure one of the questions is, well, how does this affect me and what can I do about it, if anything? And I think those are kind of questions for individuals that are as important as they are for strategies. I'm going to leave it there.
Christopher?
Yes, as Anne says, crisis, what crisis? Crisis is having students stranded in a country where a tsunami has just hit, in an area where war has broken out and we need to get them out. Okay, so for me, there's a timing. Are we going to be in crisis for the next 10 years? I hope not. All right. So we are in a geopolitical shifting moment that we need to be on top of. Instead of doing what we often do as humans and hunkering down and waiting for it to be over with, let's act upon it. Let's see what the opportunities are and what we can do. I mentioned in my talk a few things about, changing the paradigm. Maybe it's being forced a little bit upon us by what's happening. One of the big differences right now is that the pandemic was one thing. It was an illness. We were all masked up, worried about our survival, etc., with updates from the authorities. Here, we don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And we have to remain agile. But we also have to remain resilient. And I think that we can all relax because universities have survived pandemics, crusades, wars, you name it, for centuries. We just need to keep the cap.
So, what have we learned from the past at other challenging times that might, in fact, help us today? Or what mistakes were made in the past that we should avoid making in this particular time of challenge?
I wonder what we have learned, which is, and it was interesting hearing people talk about the pandemic this morning. One of the things I think I'm sure many of you have experienced is higher education becoming increasingly transactional. And I think Stefania mentioned how important human relationships are in higher education and how we have to sustain actually your relationship with your colleagues. Many universities I go to now are actually empty an awful lot of the time. And one of the challenges is how we maintain that kind of sense of socialization, of one-on-one. So I'd say one of the things we need to perhaps rethink is what higher education is for and how you bring one-on-one. We can talk forever about strategies for collaboration, but actually collaboration starts with individuals, and actually that sense that what we could learn from this is actually, if I asked all of you to teach Collaboration 101, what would you teach? What would be the learning outcomes for Collaboration 101? And just to come back to IAFOR in that context, and I've said this in many of these conferences before, interdisciplinarity and collaboration are hard things. And conferences are a really interesting place to see that. How many people bother to listen to anybody else's presentation? To struggle through perhaps people from that speak different languages where English is not their first language. How many people have the tolerance and the patience to listen harder in order to understand? And that's one of the things that a conference like this really brings to the fore. So I'm bringing it right down to, in a sense, one-on-one rather than big strategic claims, because I think it affects places like this and conferences like this. It's the patience and the tolerance to kind of say, actually, I'm going to try and listen to what this person is saying, even if they're struggling, or even if my language isn't the same or as good as. Many people, and I get it, Paris is a wonderful place to be, but have the tolerance and the patience to actually listen and to be hospitable to other disciplines, because that's at the core. And one of the things I think we've lost in our impatience with the world sometimes is the tolerance, the decency, the respect, the resilience to listen to another person trying to do something where they've made an effort to make a presentation. So I would say that's one of the things that we need to perhaps relearn in a world that's always in a hurry.
Please.
Comparing this again to other challenges we've had over the years. I mean, at my age, we went through, in my career, we've had SARS, we had the tsunami, we had bird flu, we had Katrina, the hurricane in New Orleans to deal with, getting students out, so on and so forth. And there's been many other examples, all right? But the pandemic was the big whammy. But the difference for me with all of those is that these are natural disasters, these are pandemics, etc. But they did not attack the fundamental values of higher education and research. They may have impeded us from moving forward the way we wanted to for a while, and so on and so forth. But during the pandemic, once we sort of figured out this wasn't a 3-week deal, but nearly 3 years, what did we do? We got organized. We figured out that video conferencing should be a daily thing and not something we do once in a while when we, find the projector and hook it up because some poor person in Japan can't tune in. All right. There were some good things that came out of all of that. But now we're in a situation where the geopolitical situation is shifting and the universities are somewhat under attack, or even majorly under attack. So this is, for me, the big difference. And the more we stay unified, the more resilient we are. And so far I've seen lots of unification in the world, lots of solidarity. It's only by working together that we will conquer those who would like to put us down, to impede us from doing what we do, to take away our freedoms, etc. We must stick together.
So, on that theme of sticking together, so what are the challenges around specific cooperation protocols between universities today? Does it feel different from in the past, or is it? It's always challenging, but what is your sense of where we are in terms of possibilities for cooperation across institutions, but also across national boundaries?
You're looking at me. Which
I can start. Or you
carry on with.
No.
Fewer and better. I spent a long time in university executives with people telling me they'd signed a memoranda of cooperation, and I used to be the kind of irritant in the room when I said, "What have you signed it for?" Was it for a Christmas card list? Because an awful lot of memoranda go absolutely nowhere. I have seen so many universities. And one of the KPIs is, we've got thousands of memoranda, and so you get thousands now of digital Christmas cards. But how many do you do anything that's really useful with? And how many of those do you really trust in terms of human-to-human relationships? And one of the interesting things about all of that for me is who do you actually trust? I mean, when you sign a memoranda with a university of any kind, or even outside a university, it has to be bigger than 2 individuals. And quite often, most memoranda are established between 2 individuals, but you have to expand it. And I think one of the reasons I say fewer and better, I would personally rather have fewer really fantastic relationships with people that we know what the point of the relationship is, but actually that they're bigger than any 1 or 2 individuals. Because, and apologies for anybody who isn't like this, but an awful lot of academics are very, very precious about their contact list, but they don't often share it with their university. So there's a real kind of contradiction quite often between those academics who are incredibly well networked and actually the big relationships that sustain over time and have fantastic relationships. And I ran several of those in my life. One with Japan when I was in the UK, that we ran for 25 years. And it got stronger and stronger and stronger. And it was such an extraordinary set of relationships that were between maybe 200 or 300 academics that work together rather than a kind of hundreds and hundreds of MOUs and lots of Christmas cards, but not very much more. And I think that sense of being real, of trusting, of building relationships. I mean, Christopher mentioned doing research projects or teaching collectively, moving academics and moving students. Actually sharing in cultural translation, I think, is one of the things that enriches those things. And we need to keep focusing on the purpose of what collaboration is for and what those relationships build.
I couldn't agree more, Anne. I mean, the fewer the better is more the norm these days. I remember way back in the day some of the rankings of business schools and all of that, because I was in a business school. In France, one of the criteria was how many partnerships you had. And I thought, well, gee, if all they want to know is how many partnerships I had and we get extra points, I'll go out and sign 1,500 partnerships. But I doubt we'll be doing much with all of them. All right, so this is what I do on a daily basis. Let's talk about partnerships in this moment. Now, what happened during COVID in terms of partnerships? What did we realize? We realized who our true friends were, right? They were the ones who, despite worrying about their own survival and those of their loved ones, were online with us, trying to do international stuff while the world had pretty much come to a standstill. Remember that? It's kind of reminding me of when, I was a kid studying in Grenoble, and who would send me a letter? We didn't have email. You realized who your true friends were. So in times of crisis or uncertainty, you look toward your friends. Today, the geopolitical situation has pushed us even more to make 5 key moves. First of all, I mentioned it earlier, change paradigms. Second one, adjust and reposition our strategies, and this includes partnerships. The third one is try new models of collaboration. Is the old semester abroad, study abroad for a year, double degree that we practice quite well here in France and Europe and in Asia, is that still relevant? Students I know are looking for creative forms of mobility. So I've launched a lot of ideas on creative mobility, staying longer, less time, etc. Re-energize our alliances to meet the challenges of today and choose partners more carefully, as we were saying, with whom we can get work done. One policy that we put in place was, right when I arrived a year ago at IP Paris, was there would be no more empty shell agreements. If we cannot go in front of the press upon signature while we're taking the lovely photos and say exactly what we're going to be doing over the next 2 to 5 to 10 years with the partner in research and education and innovation, then why are we signing the agreement? They're not just about, go ahead. I need that. Thank you. Partnerships are not just a PR tool. One applause, thank you. They are there to help us progress, to create knowledge and science together for young people. We are to try to develop our partnerships over 2, 5, and 10 years with 4 characteristics in mind each time. Both education and research must be at the heart of it. So exchanging students, but also working on emblematic research projects together. The collaborations must be deep mission-aligned collaborations in areas such as AI, health, energy, climate, and of course all of the fundamentals, but that is what's driving us at the moment. There needs to be a geographical spread as well. We are anchored here in Europe. We fully believe in our European position and our European responsibility, but we love working with people from Asia, South America, North America, Africa, etc. So, in a nutshell, to round it off, we also need commitment from our bosses, and we need funding because these partnerships also take a little cash to move forward, to kickstart them. It doesn't have to be big, big amounts, but a little bit to get us moving forward. And then we can go get the bigger amounts from national research organizations and elsewhere. So we've been pushed to rethink partnerships, and it's not a bad thing.
Thank you. So the term study abroad has come up a couple of times now. And given the fact that we are in unsettled times, whether we want to call it a crisis or not, what are your thoughts on students studying abroad at the moment? What are the challenges? What advice would you give to students who would like to exercise their international mobility? And how can they protect themselves or make wise choices?
Okay. Let me just put it this way. Listening to students and their international plans for the last 35 years, and I was one of them back in the day, often a student will come in your office and he or she will have the plan, right? I want to do this in this country, and that's it. What's your plan B? Well, I have no plan B because plan A is going to work. Yeah, people are laughing. You've heard that one, right? I've spent a big part of it trying to tell students, well, you never know what's going to hit the fan. You might want to have a plan B in mind. So, a couple of things is I would tell students, first of all, study abroad is going to change your life and change your life for the better, and we are many examples of that here today. So, whatever happens in the world, don't give up. Make sure that you keep on wanting to study abroad and find a solution. Now, I would say to students that they would need to have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. Line them up in terms of the project, the destination, the type of, not just study abroad, but there's also work abroad. And when I said it was compulsory here in France, it's going abroad that is compulsory. So have those backup plans. Also look at going off the beaten path. Sometimes when I show up at a new institution, I look at where the students are going. And you've got 500 students in a cohort going abroad because they have to. And they're going to like 6 countries. Good Lord, there are, 200 countries in the world-ish? Maybe, there are countries where they don't want to go for various reasons, and that's fully understandable. But we need to expand. We need to let students know why more of them should be going to India, why more of them should be going to Brazil. We in France do not have the monopoly on high-quality higher education. There are fantastic institutions all over the world. And not just the usual suspects need to be the most frequented. US, UK, Australia, Canada, because they speak English and it's easier and so on and so forth, and the whole song that we've been hearing forever and ever, amen. And then, of course, I would tell students to make sure that they look to where it's safe and secure and things will be okay. Maybe check the history of the university they'd like to go to in terms of their response to different issues and how they're taken care of and all of that. And finally, just to be resilient, like the rest of us. Be ready for anything.
I guess I'd start with, why do you want to go there? And I'd say, so I had lots of students who have been to, gone from the UK to Asia, and you kind of say, well, do you like soupy gloopy things for breakfast? And because actually you're going to change, everything's going to change. So do your homework before you go and understand the cultural symbols, the food, what matters to those cultures and countries, what not to do, If you're going to go to a country that doesn't drink and you drink every night, just remember you're not going to drink, you're going to enjoy tea a lot. And it changes things. I mean, the climate is different. You dress differently. You're respectful of different cultural norms. And those things, when students are kind of looking at the kind of world, oh, I just fancy going there, I fancy going there because it's exotic. And that's fine, but actually it's also different when you go and live somewhere and you have to find your way around. I know we now have lots of social media and lots of clever things that translate instantly, but I was advising students long before all that existed. I travelled long before all of that existed, and you had to find your way around. And you relied actually on all sorts of other non-verbal communication. I used to have to draw what I wanted to eat because I couldn't speak the language. Those things are really, really important to surviving in a country, never mind. And it's actually where most of the learning happens. So it's now very, very easy, and mobility is relatively easy in the world, politics aside. But actually, I think studying the culture in the country a little bit before you go, understand its history, understand its motivations, understand why certain things happen or are understood. And I'll give you a really simple example, which I just experienced. I've been struggling. I've been working in Hong Kong with a university, trying to understand why, and trying to get all the faculties to write a strategy for research. Might sound very simple. And everyone was coming up with the same thing. They kept describing this kind of rolling program. And I suddenly realized, of course, that the Western perspective, and certainly the colonial perspective in Hong Kong, was about putting frameworks around things. The British, they love bureaucracy, rather like the French, but they also put kind of 5-year packages together. And of course, the Chinese mind works on a scroll. It doesn't frame anything. It just rolls with it. And suddenly the conversation changed. And it's really interesting to kind of understand, even at a strategic level, how those different mindsets come together. So I would always say, yes, of course, think about not the food for the food's sake, but the food as a cultural proposition, the language as a cultural proposition, how people dress and how people work, how the day works. Here you have there's a certain strictures about France, for example, about when lunch is and when dinner is. It's much less fluid in some ways. I mean, Paris may be an exception, but it's really interesting what those cultures do to change the way your life works. So for me, I would always say to people, start there and understand why you want to go and what you want to get out of it beyond whatever the education is or whatever your specialism is. A study abroad or work abroad is actually an immersive experience. We usually connect that to XR and things like that at the moment, but really it's about that total immersion in a culture. And if you really want to immerse yourself in it, start with the things of everyday life. And the rest is, education is relatively easy after that, but it has to start, I think, with the kind of cultural proposition you're going to. So I'd always want to start there.
So thinking not just about students, but about early career faculty, young researchers, who are dealing with a lot of unsettled sort of protocols now, funding maybe challenging or challenged. What advice or thoughts do you have on how they can best prepare themselves for a career at the moment, given the fact that we don't know what the next 5 to 10 years look like?
I mean, one of the things I think needs to change, and this is connected to it, is actually quite a lot of the time we talk about input in higher education. Well, and getting to the next stage, getting a undergraduate degree, getting a postgraduate degree, getting a PhD. And actually, I think one of the things it is shifting in the world, but it's not perhaps shifting enough, is most of the time, if you ask students of at any level, but particularly at the moment at doctoral level, what do you want to, what difference do you want to make in the world? I think having a little bit more sense of what that is, of where you want to make a difference and what it is you believe you're going to do. I mean, the PhD is increasingly a sort of ticket into academia, but we actually educate too many PhDs in the world, probably. And so they're not all going to go into academia. Academia is actually shrinking in many ways. So there are a set of questions about what it is you want to do and where do you want to work in the world, and how does that guide the principles that you construct. And I think I would definitely start there before you sort of go on to what connections you make and all the other bits and pieces that you have to do. But what difference do you want to make in the world? And then thinking about how you want to do that or where you want to do that.
Any thoughts?
I had the opportunity to meet 10 or 12 early career researchers, mostly French, when I was in Boston the other day. We brought them together just, as a matter of fact, to talk about that. Everything that's going on in the U.S. Now, they're doing amazing things, from animal research to, I don't know, all sorts of things. Sciences, humanities, etc. What was interesting is that in spite of everything going on, they're still thrilled about being in the U.S. and they want to continue. I mean, fabulous opportunities, lots of cash, etc., to carry out what they're doing, etc. There was just one who was already thinking about, well, maybe some sort of a return to France. And others that we have met are asking us questions about, well, how could we come over here to work with you? And there are colleagues who have had their funding just stopped. Millions and millions stopped. I mean, you've got that, I'm sure. Our advice so far has been, first of all, understand that you're not alone, that there is a big group of young researchers. It seems to be sort of the particular cohort of people in academia who have been affected by this, by the shift in what's going on in the US in particular, for example, with PhDs no longer having the funding, they can't do the research that they were doing, and so on and so forth. So I would say take advantage of the doors that are opening to network abroad. And this is more than a plug for France and Europe. I do firmly believe in Choose France and Choose Europe, and we will promote it, and our doors are opening, and we're putting in place different models for young researchers, seasoned researchers, etc., to come to France and Europe to participate in their research. But that won't just happen like that by applying online. I would say start talking to your professors, tapping into their network, looking at where you could go to continue or where you could find funding to continue what you are doing. You're not alone, and keep reaching out, building that network. Think about going abroad. Doors are open over here, for example.
Yeah, the whole world's got open for business on it, hasn't it, at the moment?
Well, I want to leave some time for questions, but I do want from the audience. But I do want to ask you to put on your crystal ball, your seer's hat for a moment. Look into the crystal ball and tell us what you see as the future of international higher education. What do you think the next 5 to 10 years will offer us, or what challenges do you think we will face?
I'm sure Christopher's got lots of thoughts on that one. You want to start?
I could. All right.
I mean, I'll start with one.
Okay.
That's I think really interesting, and we used to talk about brain drains.
Right.
We used to talk about, this country does this, and there's a brain drain, or there's a lot of money and a lot of cash here, so there's another brain drain. I think at the moment we're in a kind of brain soup. And it's kind of where and how do you want to position yourself in the world?
Yeah.
And what questions do you want to ask? Or what difference do you want to make? And I think that question keeps kind of circulating. There'll be people who want to run with one ideology or another. And they will gravitate in one direction. Others will take their exit and move away. I mean, we saw it in the UK with Brexit. Lots of people suddenly became Irish, German, Austrian, or anything but British. And that was very sad to see, to be honest. But I think the same thing is going to happen on steroids at the moment. I think there's going to be a real soup. Brain soup will and then things will land again. So when the music stops or changes, but I think from an educational point of view, I would say quite seriously, there are some really big reflections for what it is we prepare doctoral candidates for, what we prepare our master's students or undergraduate students for. And I was really serious when I said, actually, things like collaborative skills, really what does interdisciplinary education mean? And how do we teach people to be generous, welcoming to other fields, and sometimes just a little bit more conscious about the silos we create very quickly in things like discipline. So that sense of generosity, of tolerance, of collegiality in a world where, I mean, Christopher showed lots of metrics earlier, but those rankings do a lot of good for lots of people, but they do an awful lot of damage, a real lot of damage, because they drive behaviors. They drive behaviors like citations. They drive quantity over quality. And I think we've got something really serious to deal with in higher education, which is actually human to human and human. I mean, Stephanie said it earlier, that kind of sense of the human imagination being at the core of what we have to really celebrate and do something about. Take on that.
And I know you have some thoughts on this.
How did you know? But it's the toughest question to answer. You know? Crystal ball stuff. I'm lucky to be far enough from retirement to be able to participate, at least actively like this. First of all, I guess I would say, and I've said it a few times today, is we've always sort of tried to resist the shifts and the changes, to stay on our old trusty models of everything. In France, we have the double degree model for our exchanges, the semester abroad, etc. We're very proud of that. We've been working on it for 30-something years. We don't want to change that too easily. But when you've got students saying, but I just can't do that anymore. I don't want to spend 2 years in Germany to get a double degree. I want to spend 3 weeks here, 4 weeks there, 4 weeks somewhere else, see the world, be road ready when I hit the pavement for my career, etc., creative mobility, etc. So I would have to say, if we succeed at embracing properly the shifts, if we pay attention to the opportunities that are created by the shifts, and we can name a few, then we will see some major changes in internationalization in higher education and research in the coming years. Now, if we just sit here and wait for it all to happen, that's going to be a crying shame, because the opportunities are huge. I can think of one that, frankly, I would like us to maneuver on a little bit more. And that, in terms of France, and my own institution as well, is opening up more to and communicating to students who don't know France very well. Students are being impeded from going to different countries for different reasons. I mean, there might be a political situation west of us across an ocean, but there is also capping of the number of international students going on in certain countries. There's funding that's being slashed. There are various reasons to start looking for alternatives. Never before has France been so heavily inundated by applications from Pakistan, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., because of the political shifts and needing to go elsewhere and seeing, finally, and thanks to the fine work of our diplomatic corps and Campus France, I must salute them along the way, of getting the message out. So in terms of students, I would hope that we would make the right moves to get those who haven't been coming to our countries to come and spend time with us to see what we're all about. In terms of general relationships between universities, there's no better time to create stronger partnerships and alliances. I'm repeating myself perhaps a little bit, but Donald asked us to look into the crystal ball. I was at Harvard the other day. I mean, they're happy to see friends. And I'm not being funny. And we all always are. And at the moment, we need to seize this moment to make sure we all help each other out, come together, strengthen our alliances, because we will resist what might be coming next. We will remain resilient. And science and education must remain resilient in order to keep its openness around the world and keep our interconnectedness. So I do hope we will embrace the change, follow it, and capitalize on it.
Well, thank you. I'm conscious of time, but I think we have time for a question or two from the audience before we take our break. I'm not sure if we have roving microphones or not, but I see Melina does. So if there is a question you would like to pose to either Professor Boddington or Christopher Cripps, please just raise your hand and we will do our best to recognize you.
Thank you very much. So a very useful suggestion and thought you share in this discussion. I thank you very much. I'm Dina. An early career faculty. I started my position as associate professor in France. I'm not French, by the way. Just a few years ago, I started my career here. And very interested to discover more about research collaboration. Faced to interesting topics that we might agree or discuss in a conference, for instance. As you say, we are, or French is open for business. How to detect a potential collaboration and connections. Does financial support or grants can guarantee that collaboration? As you mentioned before, that the most important thing is not having a lot of, but few, but qualified or with quality topics or collaboration. So what is your suggestions to that question? Both of you.
How do
Thank you.
How do these start?
I can start with. I mean, there are often two things about partnership. You can either partner with people that agree with you. That's one thing. So you find kindred spirits, and people you want to agree with, or you partner with people who are complementary to you, who will give you the toughest critique because they add something to expand your and test your proposition, whatever that is. You still got to get on as human beings, which is why I think that human to human idea of what collaboration is, which is to, respect one another's view, test one another's view. And in a world that shouts a lot on social media, that can be very difficult. So finding those partnerships is about building that trust. And it's an intellectual trust as much as anything else. It's actually just trying to understand the point and the purpose of a collaboration. And that's about it's actually what conferences are for, I hope, is that not only you can find the spark of agreement or fascination or interest, but you take the time to have the conversation, because that's what will matter. And that you can then, the great thing about conference is that starts it face to face. You can then follow it up. We do have Zoom and Teams and all of those other things now to do that with. But actually that sense of trust, intellectual trust, and testing is where I would always start, human to human, and mind to mind, in that context. You can and go from there. Start there. Think about what it is you want to do together, and then search for the money. Now, lots of people will tell you, lots of people tell you to chase the money first. But you don't often come up with good ideas that way around. So it's just finding that kind of intellectual shift. The only caveat to that, I would say, is once you've got your own sense of collaboration, it's actually how you can pivot that when you do see funding opportunities. And they might not look obvious. So I think there's two things, but I would do the mind to mind before I would do the chase the money, personally.
You want to add?
Oh, I don't have a lot to add. That was excellent. But yes, I mean, the money is out there. What we love in international work that we do, I mean, oftentimes professors will say, well, are you, going to be doing this top down or bottom up? And I say, well, we want a little of both. And bottom up is fabulous. There's no pejorative sense to that. It just means we love when researchers come to us and say, I'm working with these fine people in Germany or in Korea or, wherever, and there's an opportunity to do such and such a project. Do you have some funding? And who knows? Maybe you just didn't know that there's a partnership already with that university, that there is a funding scheme available. And if not, maybe we could develop one. So start the relationships, build them up a bit, and then talk. Oftentimes we go through too much top-downing. We'll head to a university somewhere and we realize, oh my goodness, we didn't realize we already have 2,000 co-publications with this university in the last 4 years. Holy cow, that's a lot. Why aren't we, bringing that to some sort of a point where we identify who's actually working with their fine colleagues at this university, put some more money around it, and make more emblematic collaborations as opposed to just grassroots. So you could help build that.
Matthew, do we want to do one more? And then perhaps take our break.
Very good morning. I'm Dr. Abhirami from India. My question is to Dr. Christopher. Respected sir, you mentioned about the collaboration between humanities and sciences. But I feel in reality, the scholars and faculty in humanities live in an island. In sciences, they have a lot of allied courses where they can strengthen up their research. But in humanities, we always find another discipline. Like when I'm an English faculty, I collaborate with any other language faculty, but not with sciences. But when we come to higher education, thinking of mobility, colliding with sciences is very much important. So what is your take on this, and how would you advise humanities to strengthen their profile?
Yeah, I think Anne could help as well, and you too, Donald. Don't escape. But let me just, real quick, from my point is, The more we can do interdisciplinary research collaborations, the better. We have one of our centers for interdisciplinary research at IP Paris brings together science and the arts and humanities. It's called Spiral, if you want to look it up on our website, Spiral, as in spiral. And we have people working in the hard sciences, physics and AI and all of that, working with artists, musical people, theater people, the humanities across the board. We are more than willing to work across fields for interdisciplinary research. Sorbonne University, I don't speak for them officially anymore, but I was here just a year and a couple of days ago, and they still have it. Various disciplines, science plus foreign language, science plus philosophy, etc. So this can be done, and it is fantastic to partner with those types of programs.
I think the question I would put back to you is, what do you bring to science? So what would you say if you met, there's probably not too many hard scientists in this room, but if you went into a science faculty and you said, I'm an English scholar, they kind of go, what are you doing here? The question is, what do you bring to that party? And that's the interdisciplinary question all the time. We all learned about life through a discipline, but we invented disciplines. We created the structure we're now trying to bridge. So we need to know what our discipline is for and what it can bring to any interdisciplinary question. And English has a place in that. Media has a place in that. My own discipline was architecture. What do I bring to that? A whole series of things. But you have to ask that question afresh every time you start a collaboration. What is it that you bring, as well as what is it you want to learn from that question? So I think it takes intellectual labor on all our parts to do that, and actually just bring those to the table. And that's the way I'd kind of start that question, rather than, well, how do we collaborate? We collaborate by knowing our discipline, knowing what we bring to the party, and knowing and being willing to learn and to take that forward.
Christopher wants to add
I just thought of a prime example, right, from your home country of India. I have the privilege of having set up partnerships between IIT Delhi and Sorbonne University when I worked here, and also now with IP Paris. And when I was here at Sorbonne, we put together the Franco-Indian campus for health. IIT Delhi has a full humanities department, social sciences, etc. And they were part of the team from start to finish putting together that Franco-Indian campus for health. And we had students going over there from our various health programs and neurology and so on that were involved, and they were learning about the social science part of what they do. So it's not a foreign object. Maybe it just needs to be better promoted.
Thank you both. And I think we should draw this to a close. There'll be time for conversation in the break. But please join me in a round of applause for Professor Ann Boddington and Christopher Cripps.